It was 3:14 a.m. when the front door latch clicked. Not the sound of a key, but the subtle mechanical release of someone trying to avoid waking the house. I was lying in the dark, my eyes fixed on the ceiling fan as it sliced through the shadows. I had been awake for 3 hours, watching a digital icon on my tablet. For months, we had shared our smart home security dashboard, a feature designed for convenience that had slowly morphed into a silent digital tether. She had told me she was working late at the office, a deadline that kept her anchored to her desk until well past midnight. Yet, the garage sensor told a different story. It had opened at 7 p.m. and closed again minutes later, remaining silent until just moments ago. My phone was resting on my chest, silent and cold. I knew exactly where she had been. The data was there, buried in the background logs of our shared network. At 3:15 a.m., I did the simplest thing imaginable. I swiped down on my control panel and disabled the home network sync. I didn't turn off the cameras, and I didn't block her access. I simply disconnected my device from the shared account, rendering me a ghost in our own digital ecosystem. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. I heard her moving through the kitchen, the faint clatter of a glass hitting the counter, the muffled hum of the refrigerator. Then, the silence was broken by the distinct rhythmic chime of a tablet notification. It was her device. She was checking the logs. I imagined her face, the furrow of her brow, the rising anxiety as she scrolled through the list of connected devices and realized mine was no longer there. A moment later, the bedroom door creaked open. She didn't turn on the light. She slipped inside, moving with the practiced grace of someone who expected to find me asleep. She crawled into bed, her movements sharp, almost frantic. She smelled of rain and something else, a sharp, unfamiliar scent of expensive tobacco that definitely didn't linger in any office building I knew. She lay there, perfectly still. I knew she was awake. She was waiting to see if I would stir, if I would ask the usual questions about her long night. I kept my breathing shallow, rhythmic, the performance of a man deep in REM sleep. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it immediately, but I felt her hand trembling beneath the duvet as she reached for it. She was trying to re-establish the connection. She was trying to find me. By 3:30 a.m., she could no longer contain her agitation. She sat up abruptly, the mattress shifting under the weight of her sudden movement. She didn't go to the kitchen this time. She stood in the center of the room, the faint glow of her screen illuminating the confusion etched into her features. She walked toward the walk-in closet, her voice a whisper, yet loud enough to pierce the quiet. She was making a call, her voice clipped and urgent. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone, a frantic, pleading edge that stripped away the facade of a tired employee. She was caught, not by me, but by her own dependence on the very surveillance she assumed was hers alone. I waited for her to finish, for the hushed tones to fade into the soft thud of her pacing. Then I sat up. The sudden movement caught her off guard. She spun around, phone still clutched in her hand, the screen casting a pale, sickly light on her face. "You're up," she breathed, her voice tight. I looked at her, my expression neutral, reflecting none of the turmoil inside. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, my voice steady. The silence that followed was suffocating. She looked at her phone, then at me. "Your home account is down," she said, trying to regain her composure, to pivot back to the role of the exhausted spouse. "I know," I said. It felt redundant, a heavy, unnecessary burden, so I removed it. "Why?" Her question was sharp, defensive. "You were gone for 9 hours," I said, finally letting the weight of the realization show. "The office didn't keep you. The garage sensor didn't lie. Why are you checking the dashboard the second you walk through the door?" Her eyes widened, the realization hitting her that the game had shifted. "I was just," she started, but the words died in her throat. "You were looking to see if I knew where you were," I finished for her. "You were looking to see if I was watching you, which means you knew you were somewhere you shouldn't have been." She began to cry, but there was no sorrow in it, only the cold, hard panic of exposure. "You don't get to monitor my movements while you hide yours," I said. "That is not how trust works. I am done being the silent observer in a house where the truth is considered an inconvenience." She tried to approach me, to reach out. but I stood up and walked past her. I had already packed a bag earlier that evening. I didn't need to look back to know she was standing there staring at the empty dashboard, desperate for a connection that I had permanently severed. I spent the next week in a hotel, a place where no one could track my presence, where no shared network tethered me to a life built on digital deception. She sent hundreds of messages, all of them centered on the same theme. She was confused, she was hurt, she wanted to explain, but there was nothing to explain. The data had already told the story. When we finally sat down in the mediator's office, she tried to portray my withdrawal as an act of calculated isolation. My lawyer didn't need to say much. He simply presented the access logs. My wife had checked my location, my home presence, and my device status exactly 42 times in the hour after she returned home. She wasn't looking for her husband. She was looking for a jailer. And when she couldn't find one, she panicked because her freedom required me to be under her thumb. The judge didn't need to hear about the tobacco or the office lies. The story was told in that one moment at 3:15 a.m., when the realization that she was no longer being monitored became more terrifying to her than the prospect of the truth. We live in a world where we demand visibility from others to mask our own darkness. We use technology not to protect our bonds, but to secure our secrets. When I turned off my location, I wasn't just disconnecting a device. I was withdrawing my consent for a relationship built on the need to hide. And in the end, that silence was the loudest, most honest thing I ever said to her.